Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 445 chainsaw. Customer complaint is that he ran it over. We'll look the saw over and see if it's salvageable or not. And if it is, we'll go through the process of replacing those parts. So I don't know why this happens so often, but it does actually. I get a lot of saws in that have been run over. Probably more run over saws than dropped saws, which to me seems kind of crazy, but maybe not. Not as many people are climbing in my area. You know, I service mostly residential saws. So, you know, if a person is going to drop a saw, they're probably in a lift or a bucket truck, as opposed to climbing. They might drop it. Anyway, let's look this thing over here. We got the starter off. One thing I always am mindful of when I have one that's been run over is whether or not the crank was bent, because if you put a lot of pressure on that flywheel from driving over it with a truck, you can easily bend the crank. So I usually rotate it and check the gap at the ignition coil and see if that's changing or touching. This thing looked pretty normal. In fact, there wasn't a ton of dirt packed in around it where it was run over really hard. You know, he may have run over the bar or just bumped into it. I don't know. I wasn't there. So let's get this stripped down a little bit farther and take a closer look. You know, we got a broken handle. We're going to pull that off. There's 3 screws on this side. 2 of them go into the fuel tank and 1 goes into the anti-vibe mount. And then underneath the saw, there's going to be 2 shorter screws that go into the fuel tank. But as we saw, one of them was missing. And the other one is still in there because it was broke off the handle. The tank was cracked, so we're going to have to replace that. And we need 1 more screw for the one in the handle that was missing. I like to keep a collection of screws around from old dead saws, you know, before I recycle them or strip and flip them. Sometimes I save the screws. Comes in pretty handy. Here's the screw for our chain catch. It goes into an anti-vibe mount that's connected to the tank. Here's a screw for a buffer that's kind of a locating buffer, travel limiter kind of buffer. And you'll see when the screw comes out, the reason it's not backing all the way out on its own is because the end of it is just a smooth shaft and not threaded. I guess I didn't show it to you, but it's designed just to have the smooth part of that bolt go into that rubber buffer. Alright, what do we got now? There's our new tank, and you can see that it doesn't come with fuel lines. So we're going to have to harvest these lines. We'll take the line off the carburetor. And our fuel return, and I think our tank vent had a line on it. I wasn't paying attention, I was babbling here. Here's another anti-vibe mount, the final one. There is a buffer down below where my thumb is, right there. We're going to need that for the new tank. And then we got the throttle cable in there as well. So if we open up the throttle and hold it open, we can pop the ferrule of that cable out of the catch on the carburetor. And then we'll be able to remove this throttle cable. kind of hung up right now. There we go. So we've harvested a fuel tank. Get this broken brake handle off of here. These are special shouldered screws. Now be careful when you take the handle off because there is a spring right there on that detent. We pop it out, you'll see there's a spring on the end. Again, I didn't show you very good, but there it lays on the bench. Alright, we're going to take the fuel filter off the old fuel tank line. And then these lines are just pushed into the tank. We can pop them out. That's our fuel return line. It just goes into the tank and stops. And I'm going to put a little bit of press fluid on the hose and push it into the new tank. Use a soft round edge tool. Oh, I should rephrase that. You can use a hard round edge tool. Here's our fuel line that would have the filter on it. We'll clean the schmutz off of here. A little bit of press fluid, rubber lubricant, whatever you're going to use. And we'll push that into the tank. Here we go. And this will have to be oriented a specific way. And the hose, the shoulder on that hose kind of matches the fuel tank. If you look at it, you shouldn't be able to get it wrong. Now we'll fish the hose out of the tank, and you know, this is harder to do when there's no filter on it. We'll put a new filter on. Alright, that looks good. So we're also going to have to transfer all our trigger parts over to the new tank. There is a single Phillips screw that's holding the gray cover over the trigger assembly right there. There's a pin that locates the trigger. We'll pound that out. Here's our pin. This is our operator presence lever. A couple of tabs on it. You can see them once I pop this out. We just flex the handle a little bit, that'll pop out of there. And then the lever slides off the pin. The trigger comes out easy enough, and there's a spring on it. The hard part is disconnecting the cable from the trigger. There really isn't any slack here in the cable, and it can be a bit of a challenge. Putting it together is worse. So we got all the parts off of the old tank that we need. We're just going to transfer them to the new tank. Here's our throttle cable. I'm going to put that in position. Here's the end of the cable. And now I got to try and get that ferrule into its position on the trigger. And there's just not a lot of room to work here. Kind of a pain in the butt. I may have even edited some video out of here. It fought me a little bit. Once you get it in there, you can insert this spring in through the top, and it kind of snaps into place. And then we gotta get the trigger located up into the handle, just like that. And then we line up the hole in a trigger with the hole in a tank so we can drive our pin back in there. You just gotta find it. I don't know where it went. Did it fall on the floor? No. There it is. All right. We'll tap the pin into place. Just get it so it's even on both sides. That looks good. Here's our operator presence lever. We'll slide it over the shaft. And then we have to get that spring up inside the lever. And then just snap the lever down into place. That's it. Looks like it works like it should. Get our cover on there. And a single screw to hold that in place. All right. We cleaned up the crankcase a little bit so we're not working in all that debris. And took some time to inspect it to make sure that when he ran it over there was no other damage. So putting this fuel tank back on here, it's not a hard job. You got to get the throttle cable and the hoses pushed up through the bottom of the case. And, you know, that's kind of the hardest part, I guess. The cable's only so long, so you got to get the two pieces close to each other before you can push it through. And odds are that it's going to pop out of there at least once. Then I'm trying to push the fuel lines through. One of them is a return line. The other one is the fuel line that has the filter on it. And I think I may have said something about a vent line before, but actually this vent just vents off to the side of the tank and there's no hose on it. Different 445s and 450s over the years have used slightly different variations in the tank vent hose setup. So you can't always just swap tanks if you're using a used tank from year to year without some kind of a modification. So we've got two holes there. One of them is going to be the screw hole for the anti-vibe, and the other one's going to be kind of a locating hole for that pin. And then we have the rubber buffer where my thumb is. You get all that stuff lined up and you can put the screw in for that anti-vibe. Starting to look a little bit like a chainsaw again. Alright, we got fuel hoses and a throttle cable to deal with, so I know it's a good shot of the back of my hand, but I'm just pressing the fuel hose onto the carburetor. Just like that. This is the fuel return line. It's going to have to go underneath the carburetor and over to the other side and end up connecting to the long stem on the purge bulb. Now that sounds pretty easy, right? Just stick it on the purge bulb. Well, sneaking it underneath the carburetor can be a bit of a challenge. And it's got to be routed in such a way that there's enough line to make the trip. And I can tell you that I did mess around with this for longer than you would have wanted to watch it. So I cut some of that out of there. But once I got it where I wanted it, I'm pushing it onto the primer bulb now. Yeah, you could take the carburetor off and do it, but I chose not to. Alright, I still have to connect my throttle cable. So the sheath of the cable has to go into a holder. And then the throttle on the carburetor will get opened up so that the end of the ferrule on the cable can be put into that cam on the carburetor. And all that stuff's happening right behind my hand too. You can't see it. But there it is. It happened. We're just putting the cable back in place. No big deal, right? Okay. Now what do we got? This locating buffer down on the bottom. And we're going to need our special screw that is not threaded all the way to the end. Get smooth on that end. Got to kind of get the buffer lined up. Come on. There we go. Alright, now in front we've got an anti-vibe mount and our chain catch. We'll run the screw down for this. You might notice on this video some of the audio is a little jacked up. You know, for those of you that don't follow my videos regularly, this is an actual repair taking place in a workshop with a lot of other mechanics in it. All those other mechanics are Neanderthal knuckle draggers that work on them filthy, disgusting four-stroke engines that swim in their own dirt. And they're noisy. All right? There's a bunch of them. All right, we're going to put this handle on here. We put the spring and the detent in place, and now we're putting the special shoulder bolts on here. So those Neanderthals, I started thinking about this the other day. There's a bunch of them. Like if you had a pack of dogs or a flock of geese or a herd of horses, what would you call a gathering of Neanderthal knuckle draggers? There's got to be a good name for them. I don't know if there's an official name for them. I haven't come up with one yet. Maybe you can help me out with that. Alright, make sure that the short screws go into the bottom of the handle here. If you put a long screw in these holes, there's a good chance that that screw is going to poke through the bottom of the oil tank and make a big mess. The long screws can go over here on these three positions of the handle. Alright, that looks good. Got the handle back in place. Got the brake lever in place. This is our air conductor. Got a little spot for our kill wire on here. Kind of blew the debris off the starter. There was a little bit of dirt in some of the grills there when he ran it over. I don't know if that side was facing down and got pushed into the dirt a little bit. Alright, we got our starter on. It's looking pretty good. Top cover's just got a little bit of dirt on it from getting run over. Not bad. And it looks like it held up pretty good considering the handles were both broken and the fuel tank. How that top cover made it, I'm not sure. Getting the bar ready to go. Now, I quoted this job before I started it, and he accepted the quote. And I did not notice this. She's got a bend in it. So we're going to have to put a new bar on it. Now, you know, that brings up the question, well, what do you do when you quote a job and then you find it needs another $50 worth of parts, right? Well, as it turns out, I got lucky on this deal. The part number I looked up for the fuel tank was a lot more expensive than the superseded part number that they sent me. And in fact, my quote without the new bar, I think it was in the $200 range. And with the bar, it was only like $180 because the difference in price between the tank that I looked up and the tank they actually sent was quite a bit. So I just got lucky that the quote is going to be less than expected, but he's actually getting an extra part, which he doesn't even know about. I mean, I just gave him a number. I didn't say I'm replacing this handle and that handle and this tank and this barn or whatever. I said, you give me $200 and I'll fix your saw. And we came in at like $185, I think. All right, so that looks pretty good. New bar and chain. Well, a new bar. The chain was good yet. We'll get some oil in here. Then we're going to have to put some fuel in here and make sure it doesn't leak. You know, we've got a tank vent and some fuel hoses that were just pressed in there. You know, we don't want them leaking. So we're about to find out right now. Now, I happen to know that this is an occasional use saw, so we're going to put canned fuel in here. And then we'll see if anything leaks out or not. And if it doesn't leak and everything looks good and things starts up and runs, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 445 chainsaw that needed a new fuel tank and handles because he ran it over. Thanks for watching. Later.